Robert, you've spent, I don't know how many years and how many millions of dollars, probably more money than any person in the history of the world pursuing topics of mutual interest. You've been at this even longer than I have, which is an awful long time.
I think it even started in a past life for me. It's been a very long time.
You know, at the beginning, when I first knew you back in the late 80s, the idea of disclosure was such a far off concept. It really wasn't even, we're trying to figure out what's real, what do people know, what do we need to know. But the idea of someone announcing disclosure, whether that's the president or the Pope or something like that, was just such a far away idea.
The subject was made fun of. It was a joke.
Yeah.
And mostly by a lot of the media propagated that.
Right.
Right?
Right. I've been on the receiving end of that,
yeah.
and you have too. But now it's not so far away anymore. I mean, the idea of disclosure is being discussed. Earlier this year, the president issued a directive, said, start releasing information on these files. Now, it's been a little disappointing what's been released so far, and I don't know who's in charge of what gets released, but at least it's happened, and he's acknowledged that it's something he wants to share with the public. That's an amazing step to come that far. But you had a chance to speak directly with the president and urged him to go even further earlier this year. When did that happen?
So I was in the process for several months putting together a series of reports on 7 different topics. And UAPs, ET, and disclosure was one of the topics. And so when I was ready, I asked to see him. And so February the 6th, I was in the Oval Office with the president, and there was a staff secretary by the name of William Scharf, S-C-H-A-R-F, who was also there with the president, myself. And I had concerns about dumping so much information on him at one time. And I asked Susie Wiles, shouldn't I hold back and maybe only give him 2 or 3 papers? And she said, no. She said, go ahead and give him everything. I can tell you this. It may take him a while, but he will eventually read it all. I said, okay, I'll do it.
You don't know how much time you got with him.
I haven't a clue. I figure it's probably more than 30 minutes, but I don't know. And as it turned out, we were finished in about an hour and 15 or 20 minutes. But I could have taken 2 days because these were complex subjects. And on the disclosure UAP ET subject, which is always great fun to talk about, that's a really important one. It's super important.
What was your goal going in? What was the one thing you wanted to convey to him on that topic that you wanted to come out and have him understand?
In such a short period of time, I only had an average of like 11 minutes per paper to talk about a paper. I wish I had a lot more, but let me read to you something I told him I wanted him to say verbatim, and I described where he should say it, not where a podium existed and a lot of media existed, but I said, I want you to, for example, deliver this statement as you are getting onto Air Force One, and you're about to go through the hatchway through the door, but you stop and talk to the media, and you might say something like, I just want you to hear something. I want to make a statement. And I would said, and this is what I want you to say, Mr. President. A non-human intelligent presence has been on Earth for a very long time, using spacecraft and with performances completely beyond our capabilities and our human physics. And that's it. To say nothing else. That's it. That's all. Because what this is disclosure and it's actually confirmation. And the two are welded together. These are wedded together. And confirmation has not been officially made by any president that I know of. And has not. They've had different kinds of contact, conversations, and so forth. And a really good close friend of mine verified, Harry Reid, who he and I were very good friends for many, many years, verified with Bill Clinton that he didn't know about the subject. And this was, I think, in his second term. And there was a staffer that wrote a book, and he referred to a conversation that he and Bill Clinton had, President Clinton had, and it involved when President Clinton said to him, before I leave office, there are two things I really want to know. What the hell is the UFO subject all about, and who really killed JFK?
Yeah, his aide was Webb Hubble, who got the assignment to go dig into those.
Yes.
And he didn't get the answer.
So Harry took the book.
Right.
So I gave him the book, and I showed him where on page so-and-so it said that. So he met with the President Clinton. He said, did you say this? And Clinton said, hell yes. Would you like to know the answers to those two things, He said, absolutely, I would.
I mean, the sense that we have, after digging into this topic for a long time, presidents come and presidents go, and they have varying degrees of interest in the topic and varying degrees of knowledge of it, right? If they don't push it, they're not going to find out. Is that your sense of it?
Absolutely. They have to, somebody has to be the driving horse to pull that wagon, and it can't let go.
And I suppose even if they do press it and push it, they don't necessarily get briefed.
Oh, well, they will not have anything to do. They will not know anything about unacknowledged SAPs, for sure. And only on a really serious need-to-know basis would they have anything to do with acknowledged SAPs. TSSCI is nowhere near close enough. That was only clearances that we had. Top secret, special compartmental information. That's not even remotely close enough.
So let's go back to Donald Trump. You know him. I mean, it's not like you're hanging out and going bowling on Saturday nights, but you're friends. You've supported him over the years. A lot of money, a lot of donations in his campaigns. You know him. You've been to Mar-a-Lago. He calls you from time to time. So the chance to sit down and talk with him on this topic, that's the first time you've talked to him about it, right?
Well, it was a big honor to be in the Oval Office and being able to brief him on so many different kinds of really sensitive, important topics, and including this one. And it was a lot of fun.
We'll come back to the other topics at some point in the future conversations. I hope this is the first of many that we have. But you prepare a document for him and what you want to convey in that time period. And then there's additional material in that document. Like what? What'd you have in there?
Well, so first I said, okay, we got to clear, the Resolute desk is a very famous desk, and that's what he was sitting behind. I said, we're going to have to clear half of this stuff off the desk. So William, the staff secretary there, we were grabbing things we were grabbing things. And, so we made room for these 7 different stacks of reports that I'm leaving behind. They were more than just one copy. And so that's how it started. And we got into the topic about the UAP topic and disclosure. And we had, I remember talking at some time about the gatekeepers. So this disclosure is a process. And I was emphasizing that the disclosure process, starting with confirmation, is a big deal. That really is important for somebody like the President of the United States to say, yeah, they're real, they're here, and eliminate all the other nonsense, all the noise that's been going on for 80 years. And so I wanted him to focus on gatekeepers. And I emphasized these people because they're the ones that are in government locations and private corporation locations that have spent their substantial lives or careers working in very secluded environments, and they have custody of
the goods,
more information than they are diamonds in a coal mine. They have obtained information about ET themselves, about hardware. Other countries are working on this exact same thing. So you have to be careful not to talk about things that would give other people advantages and so on. And the gatekeepers, I've told people that they're heroes of a different kind. A lot of people would laugh at that, but it's true. It's true. They go to their graves taking information that their spouses have never heard. Their children have never heard. They can't talk about it to any friend. So they're isolated about that. And after a while, I think that must be a burden, to hold those kinds of secrets. I remember I was talking to Sappho Henderson one time, and Pappy Henderson was her husband. And she said, well, we were in the grocery store one time, and there's an article in there in one of the magazines about it's finally been revealed about ETs and aliens. And they're in the line, getting their groceries. And he says, oh my God, Sappy, he says, I guess it's out now. I can actually tell you what I've been doing all these years. He was one of the pilots of one of the cargo planes taking from Roswell in the crash retrieval of Roswell in 1947. And so, and then she said to me, well, later, and her daughter was there too, as we were taught, she was relating the story. He had since passed away, but she said it was so funny because he said, I wasn't supposed to know that because the article really wasn't an expose of fact and of truth.
It was like the Weekly World News talking about Roswell.
It was just a cover story to get attention. So you're buying the magazine, where you check out. And so, and he said, oh, well, he said, God, he said, I probably shouldn't have. He said, I guess it was just something that was out there in the magazine and I shouldn't have told you anything. So don't say anything to anybody. But that was really my first realization about how private that information is kept with everybody involved, for unacknowledged and acknowledged SAPs.
Let's go back to the beginning of this meeting. So you go in, you've got 7 papers, issues that you want to discuss with him, UAP, ET, disclosure being one of them. You walk into the office, you don't know how much time you're going to have. And for purposes of our conversation, you can't tell me and our listeners, you can't say what the president said, right?
No, I can't.
So you can only tell me what you told him. But you go into it with an idea of not just things in the sky floating around, some mystery. We've got the goods. Somewhere there are crashes. Do you tell them that there are bodies, that there are crash retrieval vehicles of unknown origin? Or how specific do you get on that?
I basically focused on him and how to prepare himself if he's not already prepared. And it's not normal for a businessman to be a researcher in these kinds of topics, survival of consciousness beyond permanent bodily death or UFOs and ETs. That's not normal. And so I was advising him to try to be as quick a study as he can because he's going to be getting advice from a lot of different folks. And so he needs to do all that he can to find responsible material to read from really good authors and reliable books that you can trust.
And government agencies, the people that work for him.
And that's tough, yes, because they can be distant from. So it depends on whether they've heard it second hand, first, second, third, or fourth hand, fifth hand. First hand would be you've actually experienced it yourself. But are you third hand or fourth hand, or how far down the chain are you in terms of the information that's been relayed to you, and how much has that conversation changed? Has it been passed on from person to person? And really, if you've got just a short glimpse of something, going down a hallway, looking into a window or somewhere where normally you shouldn't have been, maybe, but you were escorted by a friend, and maybe you saw something that was dramatic, but all you saw was the tip of an iceberg. You really didn't understand the fundamentals of what you saw. You might have saw a being, or you might have seen a structure, and so it's tricky as to when you're talking to human beings about anything. It's tricky as to what they're revealing.
All right. You're conveying to him, this is real. You need to pay attention to it. you should probably make an announcement at some point, but don't go too far. And you're conveying to him it's serious and that there have been people who've been keeping this secret for a long time, including probably from him. I mean, he's made statements here and there, offhanded remarks about UFOs, et cetera.
He's not entitled to know. On unacknowledged SAPs or even acknowledged SAPs, basically, presidents of the United States, and this is kind of rough because this field has more trust in 30-year admirals and generals. I mean, that's just, everybody kind of knows that's been around. Politicians come and they go. And so 30-year admirals and generals are much more, in the eyes of folks, people who will stay the course because they're not running for an election. They're not going to be here just for 4 years or 8 years, or if they're a senator for a term of 6 or 12 or 18 or whatever. And they're not, their life is not to please the public. It's not, their life isn't compromised by being a politician. So admirals and generals
and intelligence agency
and intelligence officers, of course, but they're not trying to please the public all the time. They're not trying to find compromises between two very diverse, large groups of folks and trying to make as many people happy as they can.
So you're conveying to him there are people who know about this stuff that have not told you because you're a temporary occupant of the White House. I don't think you want to say it that way, but
it's true.
Do you have a sense that he'd ever been briefed? We've read conflicting reports that there have been briefings for him on this topic. You can't quote what he told you, but did you get a sense that he'd ever been told about the goods?
I can't comment really on body language or comments that he said or anything like that because I don't want to do that to him.
Right.
I don't want to reveal anything. It's not my business. I was just a messenger. I was just kind of a person that's trying to give him information on a number of different topics. All of them were important. And that's it. And have my 75 minutes and I'm done.
Would you guess, based on what you know about the topic and how it's been handled over the decades, would you guess that he had been briefed or that any other presidents had been briefed? You know that Bill Clinton was not, even though he expressed an interest in it. So at some point, the president has to be told, no, we can't tell you.
I think Bush Sr. knew quite a bit because he was the head of the CIA. I think Nixon did. I think Eisenhower did. So it's kind of hit and miss over the period of history as to who has and who hasn't.
Can you tell us what would be in the briefing document that you left behind? Was it cases? Here's a wave of UFOs. Here's a case. Here was a crash. Anything like that?
Yeah. I related conversations I have had with General de Brouwer, who was the chief of the Air Force for Belgium, and there was a very interesting flap that it was about 18 months long with triangular craft, and he was in command of all the Air Force, and he really chased the heck out of these. And he told me, he said, Bob, I'm just burning fuel. And it makes no sense. He said, we're going to stop because we're not getting anywhere. All we're doing is getting closer, photographs and things, but we're not getting anywhere. We're not getting any information that is really valuable for us to understand anything, And I gave him other examples of where large amounts of witnesses were involved, and so that he could read about these particular incidences. And of course, the one with 5 Symington is in 97 was so interesting because there you had a governor who was an actual witness, and he made a joke of it and brought a guy in an alien suit on stage because he was scared to death.
It's the Phoenix Lights case.
The Phoenix Lights, which weren't just lights. It was actually friggin' craft, and it came from northern Arizona. I think it started actually in southern Nevada is where the craft began. And in the Henderson area, I think, somewhere in there. And so you see this huge triangular craft, gigantic craft going slowly. And he was scared to death, but finally, fast forward 10 years later, and he confesses that he was an eyewitness, but he didn't know what to do. So he was there at a point in time when the dynamic of disclosure could have been forced and actually a confirmation could have been from a governor of the state like that. He was a credible guy. So we've had many incidences like that where they, in the early 50s, flying over the White House and the Capitol building. We've had so many of those. So in my report, I included a lot of very dramatic, beyond a reasonable doubt kind of witnesses of exhibitions.
Did you share with him anything about your knowledge of a classified program?
No.
You got a top secret security clearance, right?
Yeah.
It was for the OSAP program for BASS.
Right.
Operated under the DIA.
Yeah.
You learned a lot during that program. It's the largest accumulation of UFO info of any government-funded UFO program ever.
Yeah.
You didn't tell him about it.
It wasn't credible enough, I felt, for him. It's just something pertaining to me.
If you were to have a second conversation with him, would you explain that ET is one idea, but it's not necessarily the only option for a non-human intelligence that's out there?
You have to tell me first, how much time do I have in this second conversation?
Let's make it an hour. You have an hour with the president. What would you tell him about who they are, who they might be?
So I would try to get into the complexity of the relationship, that once you've had confirmation, you've given that text of that little sentence I wrote and quoted there, and you start to go down the path of disclosure where it's more than just FLIR videos, and you're not seeing other things that are much more crystal clear, in video, or legitimate people in places that you recognize these people and they're around something or with something or somebody that's a holy cow, that's wow. That's a very dramatic kind of disclosure about something landing on the lawn somewhere, So I think what I would have spent time doing is talking about, how do you establish, you've been in 80 years of denial as a nation in the world. We have countries who are very upfront and others that are also in denial. Now you want to pivot 180 degrees. How do you start that relationship? How do you do that? And it's not as though that we've ever been in control. We haven't been in control of anything ever for this 80 years of modern history. Nothing. We have no ability to control anything.
That's a tough thing to tell the president, right? I would think that would be a tough thing for a president to accept.
Well, you're giving me an hour to talk to him, you said. So I'm using my hour.
All right.
So, yeah. So that's what I would, that's the really intriguing thing is, how do you do that? Where do you start and into a relationship? And I would say more like, well, I would want to start with the biggest question I would ask. I would say what I want to get from them is, my first question is, what are the chances we are going to survive ourselves? That we are not going to annihilate ourselves? Because they already are familiar with a whole lot of other species on a lot of other worlds or other planets. So chances are they have a pretty good idea of percentage. And it's not that we're a spiritual species. You talk to people that have near-death experiences, they're changed for the rest of their life. They become a spiritual person of a caliber that they've never been. But we're a long way as an average from that category, from that level. There are monsters among us as human beings, and there are angelic people among us. So we are a danger to another species. We're potentially the Klingons. We have a technological maturity that is not just going on a line, but it's vertical and it's segmented because it's jumping. And meanwhile, our spiritual maturity just bumps along the bottom, so we look at the 20th century, 60 million people were killed. Are we ever going to get beyond that? So the thing of it is, we know so little about how to have a relationship. I'm not in any position to really advise, except for the few ideas I have as to where to start. And the how is really super important. It's not going to be like A Close Encounter of the Third Kind, which was a really cool movie. And it's not going to be because of SETI. It's going to be by some other kinds of means that you're embarking on. And I'm interested in that kind of research.
We go back to your meeting with the president. You walk into the Oval Office. They clear off the Resolute desk. You spread out your 7 piles of stuff, and you start making a presentation about each one, in particular about ET, non-human intelligence. You can't say what he said to you. Can you say whether he asked questions? Was he curious?
He was distracted by other things. So he also asked me, he did ask questions, but he asked questions about other stuff that wasn't necessarily just on what I was talking about.
He's getting your input on other things going on in the world.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you had to make a guess, would you guess that you got through to him on this issue? I mean, he hasn't stood in the doorway of Air Force One and made those remarks yet, but he has taken some pretty dramatic steps on this topic since you met with him. Do you think you made a dent?
Don't know. I advised him on something that I can measure, and he hasn't taken my advice so far on what I suggested to him on a totally different, unrelated subject. But so far, he has not taken my advice.
Well, somebody seems to have got through to him because he's been taking steps that we're seeing real results. I mean, people are either.
Well, I'm talking about an unrelated subject altogether.
Topic. Right.
So yes, there are a couple of different task forces that are involved. So there is an initiation of an activity in this subject. It remains to be seen, though, that he gives actual presidential confirmation. I haven't. Maybe you're more aware than I am. Has he done that?
Not really. Nothing like what I'd call confirmation, but that's really what you're talking about. I remember us having a conversation in 2008 when right after you'd signed the contract with DIA for BASS to run this program. And you made the case then that what we need is not disclosure, it's confirmation.
Yeah.
For somebody like the president, I'm not sure if it could be anyone less than the president that steps forward and says this, and it carries the same kind of weight.
It's a big appetizer. You're looking for the entree, and where's the dessert in this whole buffet? But the confirmation is a huge appetizer to start with, and that's why I started with that in my conversation with him, is pushing him to try and make a confirmation, and maybe he wants to get personally more comfortable, he will go down in history for a lot of things, for better or worse, that people are on both sides of the fence about him and so forth. But he's involved in so many different things and has been that I don't know what his legacy is going to be. I really don't. He has an opportunity to, in this serious subject, to build a legacy using this as part of the blocks, part of the brick and the structure of the content of a structure that is very unique. So you can have all the political programs that you want and so forth, and nobody is going to really remember those as time goes by, as the decades fade away. Nobody can remember Benghazi and Afghanistan and Iraq, different kinds of things, and that's just recent history. The world goes so fast. But the president that took on the challenge of disclosure and of confirmation and actually built a satisfactory conclusion of a relationship between human beings and that subject is going to go down in history as having really accomplished something. And if it's handled right, it can be done successfully.
A lot of presidents have made comments, often after they're out of office, on this topic. Yeah, gosh, I'm real interested in that. Or wouldn't that be something? Or I think aliens could exist, something like that. But nothing like what you're talking about, which amounts to confirmation, saying it's real, they're here, we got to figure it out, and stopping it there, not disclosing.
Well, the dialogue, the ability to learn something from them is huge. What can we do for you? I mean, that's where, and one of the first things I would ask is not just, are we going to survive ourselves? Yeah, that's pretty damn important. That's like probably number one, but close behind that is, okay, we've been aware of you for a long time and the government's never admitted it, but us as a public, we know it. And we're really curious. Is there anything that we can do for you? Not just what can you do. I loved what John Kennedy what he said famously. Don't ask what the country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country. That's huge. So that's giving them a kind of a respect that they deserve.
If you were president, would you announce that, yes, we've got crash retrievals, yes, we have reverse engineering programs, and yes, we've got bodies?
Yeah, because the rest of the world already knows that. The people that count in Russia and China already know.
Because they've got their own.
Oh, yeah, freaking yes. Yeah, they've had their missiles shut down. They've had their missiles activated, depending on which country you're talking about.
Have you considered the political fallout for a president? Let's say it's Trump, because he might be the guy that would do it and just cast his fate to the winds. But he makes an announcement. Yeah, they're here. Yeah, we've got programs. Yeah, we've got crashes. We've got bodies. That's as far as I'm able to go right now. What happens to him politically? Is he able to get anything else done?
That's more than I would have said for him to say.
Right.
What you just said.
That goes too far.
I would advise him to say initially what you just said.
You just say non-human intelligence, been here a long time, and leave it at that.
Yeah, that one sentence is a starter because it's a huge cannon. You've opened up Pandora's box in terms of, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? So okay. So now you can categorize and segment into topics, and you need time to do that, and it needs to be digestible, and it needs to be not packaged in a scary kind of way, and it can't be packaged in a way that you're divulging what you shouldn't be divulging. Other countries aren't, so there's reasons to have national secrets. There really are. I mean, that's kind of like common sense, right?
We don't want the Russians and Chinese and maybe other adversaries to know how far along we are or are not on figuring this out.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Especially of that. I think that the relationship thing is a mankind relationship. It's not just for America. When you're embarking as a president on trying to initiate a solemn relationship, you're not doing for US of A only. And so and we probably can do a show on communication, but it's really complex because who are you going to have initiated? Are you going to have politicians initiate? Are you going to have military people? Because everybody has kind of their own mindset. Are you going to have a bunch of lawyers initiated? Are you going to have scientists only initiated? So it's, and how do you know to whom you're talking? How do you know you can trust what they're saying? Because it depends on the form of communication. And what are you asking for in the way of proof or demonstrations to establish trust both ways in the communication process? Because we haven't had that happen before. It is totally new ground. And frankly, we need the others' help. We need the help of the others to guide us.
You and others have made attempts to find the programs, find the legacy programs, find the goods. You had some success in that we will discuss in a upcoming conversation. But the doors, in general, the doors get slammed in your face. Jay Stratton, who became head of the UAP task force after OSAP, after that ATIP thing, he made a point to go try to find it. And he appointed this guy, David Grush, who had these high-level security clearances. Grush says he found it. There are people like Grush, whistleblowers, people who work in programs or for contractors who want to tell what they know, but are afraid they'd be prosecuted. What advice would you give the president about how to handle those folks? There have been attempts to give them legal clearance to go ahead and come forward. They're not buying it so far. Would you give them sort of a pass, the authorization to tell what they know? And would you do the same thing to corporate interests who've been hiding this stuff at the request of the U.S. government?
So it's a function of, it's a matter of faith. Mostly on the other side, that's difficult for them because the history says differently. Going back 80 years from the initial threats of people that were at crash retrieval sites that weren't supposed to be there, and the threats that was made by the military, going way back.
If you talk about it, we'll kill you.
Yeah, I'm not talking about just men in black or anything like
Right.
that. You know, so it gets down to a matter of trust. So again, preemptive pardons. That's a start, but and you need to have people that are really experienced in task force that know about the subject. You don't want people that are having to go to class and they've had no class instructions, and they can be bright people, but you need really to have people who are bright about the subject and who have had contact in different kinds of ways. And so, and there are a lot of excellent people out there. Who you have on our side as communicators really matters, and what their backgrounds are and what their attitudes are, especially.
You're talking about us communicating with them,
Yes.
the others.
Yes.
And you think that the expertise in doing something like that is in the hands of a very small group of people in the corporate world, contractors who've been carrying the ball for the U.S. government for the past 80 years?
I think the gatekeepers are yes, they should definitely have a role in terms of communication. Absolutely.
Well, let's talk about the gatekeepers, because that's part of your recommendation to the president is give them a free pass on clear them from legal liability for whatever has happened. Give them a pardon ahead of time,
Right.
and take the pressure off of them so that they can convey information that's been kept secret.
Yeah, because it all started with the government. That's where this all began. Maybe the private corporations have participated perhaps in a retrieval or two, but basically it's our own government that has sanctioned this in the private sector with all these companies. So not all, with these few companies. It's not like shame on the corporate world because there always has been a partnership. They're complicit. The United States government is absolutely, totally complicit in any kind of process of back engineering or anything to do with ETs, any kind of contact in one way or another with ETs, absolutely complicit. And so nobody can be a hypocrite on this level, you know. So yeah, the gatekeepers are extremely valuable. They absolutely need to be included in any communication process.
So you would say, for sure, you know that the government, our government, military intelligence agencies have recovered crash disks or materials or mechanisms, machinery, advanced machinery from somewhere else, and that we've handed that over to contractors to figure it out.
Yes.
Yes, for sure.
Yes. Yes. I am sure.
And your argument would be those are the guys who've been the gatekeepers and the secret keepers for the last 80 years because we asked them to do that.
Yes. Yeah. And it has behooved the companies to make progress. I mean, and you could say, well, if the companies, if it's revealed what companies have access to hardware, what's going to happen to the image of those companies or the stock value of those companies? I would be interested in buying more stock. Because if they have been that far advanced, and there's whatever their value is isn't even based on this whole secret area of technology. And they already have made progress.
You think they have made progress?
I'm just saying if.
Okay.
If they've already made progress, and if you're concerned that they're going to be somehow adversely affected by the stock market on what their company is worth, I would go buy stock, because I think the opposite is going to happen. I think it becomes a company of real interest in terms of, wow, they have a future that no other companies have. We're not exactly sure what that future is in these technologies, but now we know a whole lot more than we ever did before. And so now these companies are more free to put more scientists at the front lines in these companies to reinvigorate the staff that they currently have, and more capital, more money. And so you think, okay, more can happen more quickly. What you don't want is to see things weaponized, because that's what human beings are good at, is weaponizing every friggin' thing they can get their hands on. So that's what men do.
Would these contractors have some sort of legal liability? Let's say there's disclosure. You've been hiding this stuff all this time. There'd be some people that want to go after them, right? How dare you hide this and lie to us for all these years?
I try to give people credit for if they can have time to think things through, if they can have information, and this is a big if they can start to acquire information they can trust, and you don't have a cacophony of 100 different sources bombarding you, and it's a junk pile, and you're having to determine where are the jewels in this junk pile of information. And that's not easy to determine right off, unless you already have a background in stuff that's in the junk pile, and so you can recognize it. You and I can recognize things that somebody else wouldn't recognize, because we already know background. We can relate it to a lot of other sources of information we have. So it all triangulates to, aha, this is real. This is a fact. Okay.
I don't know if you know the specific answers to this, but let's just do it as a hypothetical. Company X gets the materials from 2 crashes. Maybe there's bodies in there. They get it from the U.S. government. Would they be required to keep it quiet? Is that part of the condition? And would they have signed an agreement? They've had the stuff for 80 years. Maybe they've made progress in understanding it. Maybe they've made machines or weapons or flying machines based on what they've learned. Is that theirs? Could we go after it? Would the public want to go after it? Would anybody in government dispute the ownership of it? And what is the agreement that they make? Is that in a contract, or is it a handshake? And they keep this secret because we asked them to keep it a secret.
So there's 2 areas of seriousness in what you just said. One is craft and one is bodies or living beings. The craft is fair game in terms of not to be so concerned, are we stepping on somebody's toes, the other's toes, if they have toes. Okay. The bodies are also higher level, but probably fair game as well, because they're anthropomorphic, robotic type of beings, or they're all biological
robots, androids,
yeah,
something like that.
But with what respect have they been treated, or is it like autopsies have been done, or has it just been necropsies like you would do on a cow? With what respect have they been treated? Were they ever given a burial ceremony or whatever? Living ones is a whole different level. That's where you don't want to make that decision alone.
Your guess would be we've had living ones, right?
Yeah, that's my guess. And I think that I think that's a whole different level of respect and interaction.
You would argue to the president in future conversations, any gatekeeper, Company X has been holding on to this stuff. They've been trying to figure it out because we asked them to do that. They've been keeping it secret because we asked them to do it.
Oh, yeah.
Give them blanket immunity, give them a pardon in advance for whatever somebody might take offense to that they've done.
They've never received anything as an award, as a recognition, been able to share their work with anybody. And so what is it that we're trying to blame them for? What exactly is it we're trying to blame them for? Not being for here, they've sworn oaths to be secretive, and they know why. And anybody who knew about what their work was going to be would know why, and they would say, "Yeah, that's totally logical." But what is it you're trying to? What is it they're trying to nail? What cross is it that you're nailing them to?
You guys lied to us and kept us secret.
Is that really all there is? Is that worth nailing somebody to a cross? Are there good reasons for not telling the truth? Well, of course there are. How many times have you not told the truth to your spouse or to my spouse or to your friends or whatever? Of course there are. And some things are far more serious than others. And some are national security. So, yeah, you have to say you're trying to persecute and prosecute these people for what legitimate reason? The entire United States government has been complicit. You're going to prosecute this case before a bench trial or jury trial, and I'm going to be the defense attorney for the gatekeepers. And I'm going to say, wait a minute. You're trying to argue to the court that these people have acted entirely on their own when I can prove to you through witnesses, and I can prosecute through witnesses to convict on capital punishment, so I can win. If I have witnesses that say, I have all kinds of government testimony from other people that are complicit with the corporations, where do you want this cross-nailing to stop? Because it's going to go right into the government area, into all secret agencies. We have 17 secret intelligence agencies. Not obviously all of them are involved in this subject by any means, but several are. Where are you going to stop? So it's not just these people working for these private corporations, right? So what are they to blame for? What is it? Why are you trying to kill them? Why are you trying to prosecute them? Instead, look how valuable these people are. What they know is irreplaceable. You can't, there is no college, university, or any place on the planet that is going to be able to teach you anything about what these people already know. They are your biggest asset walking around.
And the number is pretty small, isn't
Going to your restaurants, going to your theaters, and the number is very small.
How is it passed on, I wonder, given the level of secrecy? Let's say within Company X, some guy's been there for 60 years. He's got to go. Does he pass it on to someone else, a younger person, or how's that information conveyed? I'm asking this because you've personally interacted with some of these people. Am I right?
Well, I think it gets back to a matter of trust. It gets back to people you've known for a long time. That counts for something. You've known for a long time. Perhaps they're not all 20-somethings, and maybe it's a growth function that they start out in certain departments for a long time, work their way up to different departments that are more sophisticated in sensitivity, not more sophisticated in the physics necessarily. All that's true, probably, but in the sensitivity of where certain things start to connect all together to make something function, and maybe it's consciousness related as to how things are initiated.
Do you know if we've made any progress, if Company X, Y, or Z has actually made progress in trying to figure out how these things fly or operate? Do you know?
I don't know.
The argument has been made this year. Okay, if you've got to keep the technology secret, that makes sense. We don't want to tell our adversaries where we are on whether we can duplicate it or not. Well, what about the bodies? Why not let that out? Why not say we have bodies that are not humans?
Well, I think that's all part of the disclosure process.
Right.
You know, we know from Russia. Let's talk about, okay, cousin to what you just asked me. So we can talk about the Russian retrieval case in 88 or 89.
Kazakhstan.
Yeah. And from that 5-digit military unit, 730, what you blank, that was the main unit that was their job, to an unknown city that they took everything to. And they found a device on board that was able to be engineered into a very powerful laser. Because that's what we do. We weaponize every thing, you know, instead of saying, how can we create more food or whatever, like Levengood did with the microwaves on crops and seeds that grew much better. So, you know, purportedly, the device was extremely powerful. Somebody got hurt or killed, maybe. The intel source was highly reliable. You were part of Thread 3. You managed to get out of there with documents that we helped translate.
Yep.
Yeah. So you know about what I'm talking about.
Yep.
And so have we had opportunity? More than likely, sure, to do the same kind of thing. So when you sit here and say, well, I don't know about anything that we've probably been successful on, I would say, well, what are the odds that we haven't been? Sure, we have been, because what are the odds? If Russia is able to achieve something like that, why can't Lockheed or, you know, I'm not going to name names, but these other companies do the same thing? So people are working on it are not dummies. So you and I can sit here and say, well, probably.
Back to the Trump meeting. All right, you're there almost an hour and a half. You have the 7 stacks of reports on the Resolute desk. Did they take them off the desk when you left, or did they leave them there?
Well, actually, I was a little concerned about what's going to happen to them. So as the meeting draws to a close and everything, and the president and I are saying goodbyes, and he's got other things he's got to go to, and he said he was late as it was to go into another important meeting. And so William starts to gather everything up on his desk. And quickly, President Trump says, no, leave everything there. I thought, thank you, guys. Thank you.
That's a good sign.
I didn't want him to go into a closet somewhere and they're never seen again. Because we've all watched the movie of Raiders of the Lost Ark, where it goes into the Smithsonian, right? And so you say, oh, what's been hidden away that would, if only people had been able to see something. So at least they were left there on his desk. So I don't know what happened to him after that. And I was just glad that they were left alone.
Well, we know 2 months later he started releasing UFO information. He issued a directive. So I'd like to believe that you at least had a hand in it. I hope you planted the seed and then it goes further.
It'd be nice if something productive came of it.
And I hope the door is open where you get invited to speak more with him, because you can get into some details. Do you intend to release the report or any of the materials that you gave him?
I can't. I can't.
Oh, well.
The Pandemic Center, which was another one, I actually gave that to Senator Reid to show Obama back in 2012. And he did. But we were in a hell of a storm, a financial storm at that time. You know, the bottom of the recession, the Great Recession, and everything was going to hell.
Well, I have a copy of that report, and we should have a conversation about it on this format.
I resurrected that for President Trump's sake, because that idea of having that pandemic center is so valuable. It shouldn't go away.
Well, I think we should talk about all the ideas that you gave to him at some point, just not today. But it's been a good start here. Talk about your conversation with the president, about the possibility of disclosure, or at least confirmation, where it should start at least. And I hope he took your advice. Anyway,
The pandemic center is a fun thing to talk about.
that's next. Well, next is communication, but pandemic center down the road.
Okay.
All right.
All right. 10-4.